Okay, so this is how you're going to be taping one of our flags. The first thing you'll want to make sure you have, if you want weights, you're going to want the BGB and BDB weights. They're about this big. If you want to stand them next to your fingers, they're going to be about the same length as one of your fingers, a little shorter for the smaller bolt. Some differences with flags is if you have like the little Velcro in the top, you can use the Velcro strip that the poles come with, but you don't have to. And they also come with some crutch tips, which is what you're going to want for this. Any color tape will work. I typically go with white because it's easy to go with, but if you want to match your flag differently, that's fine. For the cheater tapes that we have, you're going to want to measure it out with a ruler, which I'll show you how to do that in this video as well. And if you have little tabs on your flag, I can definitely show you how to do those. Okay, so the first thing you're going to want to do, grab any type of electrical tape, and you're going to want to tape up the ends and the screw part of the bolts, because you don't want it to scratch up the inside of your pole, so any type of tape will work. And just tape them up because it'll tear up the inside of your flagpole. Okay, if you decide to use this Velcro piece for your flag, the way to measure it to be far enough down is you're going to go ahead and put your bolt in. The longer bolt goes on the top, and then put on your stopper. And then I typically leave a little bit of space. You can leave even less than this. I think this one actually slipped down the pole a little bit, but when you put the flag on, you want to make sure you're going to have enough space in between to be able to tape the silk down to the stopper and to the pole. Okay, so for the cheater tapes, the way we do it is we take a ruler and about right here halfway, and it's down at the end of the pole, all the way down at the end of the pole. This is the bottom of the pole, and you'll put the tape about like that. See, so if it's at the end of the pole, it's going to be about halfway through the tape, and then I just wrap it around about twice. Make sure it stays even. You don't want to stretch the tape either, because if you stretch the tape, it'll make it kind of thin and it won't overlap smoothly. You really only need to wrap it around once. I typically wrap it at least twice just so it stays there. And then for the second cheater tape, which is the one closer to the tab, I do the same process. I start halfway through this tape, and then it'll be about right here. And then, so that's the halfway point that I'm putting it on. All right, and there's your two cheater tapes. If you want to remeasure, it's going to be exactly a foot. About the halfway point on the tape is where you're lining it up from. And then same thing, halfway, halfway, and that should be how we line it up. Okay, so for the bottom stopper and the pole, this is where your cheater tapes are. And your bottom stopper is going to be the smaller of the two stoppers that you get. What I do is you just put it in at the end. You're going to cut strips long enough to cover it, and you're going to make a plus. So when I'm doing this, do one, it'll already be in the pole, and you're going to tape it down to the pole the best you can. Make sure you already taped up your bolts, because what will happen is a ring will start happening onto your pole as time progresses, and that's the last thing you want, is to destroy your pole. I typically leave it at just the plus, so the plus will be just fine. If you want to put more than a plus, like make another star like an asterisk, that's fine. If you want, you can tape it around like this. It's just really to keep the bolt secure, because the last thing you want is a rattly pole. If you want to avoid rattling, you can always double check to make sure the bolts aren't loose, which is super easy. You just take the stopper off and you retape it. Any stopper, your crutch tip is fine, either one. And you're gonna squeeze it onto the pole over the bolt after you taped it down. And you're gonna do a similar process to the stopper with the tape. It doesn't need to go all the way down the edge. You just want to make a plus on the top. Right, and you already made the plus. So what you're gonna do for the stopper is you're gonna make an X over that plus. That way it completely covers these edges. Okay, so this next part is going to be super important because it's going to secure your stopper to the pole, and if you don't do this step, you're going to be in big trouble because your stopper very well could fly off if the bolt gets loose enough. So you're going to do a spiral down, choose any spot to start, and you're just going to, you don't have to stretch it because this is going to protect your stopper and secure it to the pole. See, now I'm overlapping just a little bit. You're going to want to make sure the tape overlaps. Make sure you're not stretching it because you don't want it to get thin like that. And just spiral your way down. And I get about that much off the stopper, and then I go around, and then I add a little more. And it's just so your stopper is secured to the pole and it's not going to fly off. Don't use too much because it'll also add weight to your pole. So just make sure you have enough. I do about almost a thumb's width down. That way it's secured to the pole. Okay, so now for the top of the pole, I already put my longer bolt in. I did not put the stopper on yet because the last thing I want to do is to forget to put my flag onto the pole. So the best way to tell is if your flag is facing the right direction when you put it on the pole, so it's not upside down, is you can hold it out and just look at it, and you can kind of tell the arc is going to be headed downwards. But if you're sitting down and you can't really like lay your flag out, you can also see like the pointy part is what's going to be at the bottom of the pole. So you're going to make sure this is going to be the top, the wider angle. Or if you have a square flag, sometimes the way I look at it is I look at the seam of the flag. If it has the part that kind of like flips out just a little bit, that's going to be the back of the flag. So this would make it the bottom. So when you slip it on, just make sure it's the bottom part of the silk. Just going to slide it onto the pole. All right, this flag has tabs and it does not have a little Velcro thing. So this I typically tape down on the inside of the stopper. So when I go to tape it on the inside of the stopper, I already have the little plus and X on there. That way I don't have to do it while I'm putting it on the flag. And I just make sure a little bit's over. If you have a shorter tab, if you have a longer tab, I typically tape it to the outside of the stopper, and you'll just tape the stopper down like you did to the one at the bottom. So then you'll slip it on there. See, now I got a little space. I can also remove it and push it up some so it stays down. You can also tape it down. Since this one's going to give me trouble, I'm just going to give it a little bit of tape. I don't even have to go all the way around. It's just enough to secure the tab so it stops moving on me and doesn't irritate you 50 times while you try to tape up the flag. All right, now that the stopper's on, even though there's a little space, that's fine. You're going to make sure the stopper's as far down as you can get it because that makes sure it's secure. I can now do this spiral trick and spiral down the stopper. It's a little harder once the flag's on there if you don't want to like tangle up the flag because you can't fully rotate it as much as you could the other one. All right, and at the same time, I'm going to want to kind of start guiding my flag the way I want it. So you're going to straighten out the edges. If it's loose, you're going to want to straighten it out. Just kind of pinch it so it stays put for you. but make sure you tape down the stopper first, because the last thing you want is a flying stopper. Kind of get the flag out of the way so I can tape it down. All right. So straighten it out so it's not in your way. You're gonna pinch it so this part is all lined up. And you're gonna tape the flag down now, even though you already had a tab, you still wanna tape it down. And you're gonna keep that pinched. And I just wrap it around a few times. I kind of pull it down just a little bit so I can get the tape right over it and it won't be a problem. All right, see, but it's still pretty straight. You want to keep it straight. And then you can tape it up a little bit onto the stopper. That works fine. And that's kind of what the top is going to look like. Okay, so this next part is for taping a flag that doesn't have tabs and it has the little Velcro. So what I do to help keep the flag from starting to tear so quickly is I find the seam of the Velcro and I'll get a little tab of tape and I'll put it right over there, just half and half. This part won't even be seen, but what it does is I can line up the Velcro after I secure the flag so it doesn't rip up the silk, because if some of you notice, this one doesn't have it, but if they have them at the bottom, sometimes the bottom of the silk will start to rip and tear. So same thing, you want to make sure the flag is facing the correct direction when you put it on. I typically push the tabs out from the center of the silk, that way they don't get stuck on the Velcro as I pull them through and it glides on simply. All right, so then you're gonna have your stopper. This person didn't want weights on their pole, so it doesn't have weights, but you'd put those on first. Then you put the stopper on. See how there's still space left in between, even though there isn't a bolt. And you'll do the same trick, spiral down. Make sure you're not stretching the tape because you want it to not slip later on. If you're stretching the tape's gonna slip and then it'll be a problem. And I get it all the way around. Now it's secured to the pole, so you don't have to worry about your stopper flying off. All right, so this is the tricky part. This is where I'm gonna flip this back on the inside. And this piece of tape is what I'm gonna try to line it up with. I'm just gonna put it right up against there. Make sure it's lined up the best you can. This will help preserve the silk, because the last thing you want is your silk to start ripping. And then just to double make sure that it's really good, you still want to tape down the silk. Same trick as the last one, just pinch the edge. You can kind of pull it down so it's a little wadded up, but make sure you definitely keep it straight. Otherwise, you're going to be on the struggle bus later on. And then you're just going to cut it right there. All right, so the next part, this goes for any flag, is going to be taping the bottom part. This one has a tab on it. So I'll be using the tab to tape it down. This one's a little far into the silk, so I'm gonna have to double tape it. Most of them are typically right at the end, and then you can just tape it very similar. So the trick is when you're doing this, you're gonna make sure this seam is completely straight. Otherwise you're gonna have a twisted flag and it's gonna be really weird when it's flowing through the air. So make sure from top down to the tab, it's gonna be straight. Make sure it stays straight. And it's gonna stay that way. So you're gonna have to really make sure it's not twisting. Otherwise you're gonna have like this and it's not gonna fly right, and you're gonna get tangled in it a lot more. So since this one has a tab, I'm gonna fold it up, and then I only use like half the tab like this. It's still straight though. I'm making sure this is staying straight. I cannot stress that enough. And then I'm just gonna use the tape. This will help secure the flag extra. Most tabs are not normally this far into the silk, but this one just happens to be that way. All right, so I do that. If the tab is further down and it's sticking out, you can kind of just tape it down with the silk at the same time. So this goes for any flag, whether it has a tab or like the little fabric tab or not. You'll still tape down the silk at this part. And I typically just start completely on the silk. And then I'm making sure this is staying straight because it's really difficult if you don't keep the silk straight. And you're just gonna kind of wrap it in circles and so it stays secured to the pole. If it doesn't stay secured to the pole, you're gonna have the flag ripping off the pole in the middle of a performance, and that's pretty embarrassing and pretty hard to spin. Other than that, you just kind of tape it down to the silk and the silk down to the pole, and that's it, and that's how you tape a flag.